Have you thought about updating your 2026 leasing arrangements agreement that you may have? Well, now's the time to do that. Hello, my name is Sandra Wick, the crop production agent with Post Rock District of K-State Extension.
And I'm Blaire Todd. I'm the Livestock Production agent for Post Rock District.
Well, here we are out in the field, and as you can tell, it is winter. And I'm glad that we have a snow cover on here because we've had some really cold temperatures lately, Blaire. So we have recently compiled all the responses from our Post Rock District Leasing Arrangement Survey and wanted to provide you with some highlights of the data that we received. So as you know, about 80 to 90% of farmland and pasture land is rented and tends to be increasing around the state. So this is our 13th year for conducting the Post Rock District Leasing Arrangement Survey, and we would like to especially thank all the respondents that participated, so we will have some input in order to develop our reports that will be released. And without your input for this information, this type of leasing arrangement survey information would not be possible to provide to the producers of North Central Kansas and the state of Kansas. So we had three components to our survey, which was cropland, pasture land, and crop residue. So we conducted by email and along with mailing some paper copies as well. So how we did this was we randomly selected 75 to 85 tenants or landowners in each of our counties of Jewell, Lincoln, Mitchell, Osborne, and Smith to obtain some representative sampling around our district. So our return rates for this year were 13% up to 23%. So I think Blaire and I were fairly pleased with that amount, but we would really like to encourage you next year too, when you get that survey letter in the mail or the email, to please respond back, because we keep everything confidential. But this is the most asked publication from our extension district. So let's start with the average on the Post Rock District crop side, specifically cash rental rates. So if you're wanting to know specific rates for each of the counties, they are posted on our Post Rock District website under the crops and on the livestock tabs on the left-hand side. So the dryland cash rent average was $75 per acre with the range of $30 up to $145. So as you can see, there's quite a big range for that. But it's important to look at the average on the data anyway. We do have some irrigated data. However, only some of the counties had enough data in order to publish that. So on the crop share side, we had corn, grain sorghum, soybeans, and wheat, with the predominant share was your traditional 1/3, 2/3, with about 80 to 85% of the respondents with the 1/3, 2/3 share, with about 15 to 20% with the 40-60 share. So the most important thing is that you have an equitable share, that you talk and you have a good relationship between the tenant and the landowner. So our survey also indicated that we had a sharing cost of fertilizer, herbicide, and insecticide between the landlord and the tenant. And that's been some data that has been for the last several years. So a general rule is usually any yield increasing input for the crop should be shared between the two parties. So now I'll turn it over to Blaire.
So we'll get started with the livestock side of our survey. Our pasture average rental rate was $28 on average per acre for the district. We also had a range of $12 to $50 per acre. So just like on the crop side, we had a little bit of a range there. And the predominant grazing time was from May to November. The pasture stocking rate was generally 8 acres per pair, and that increased a little bit this year with a range of 6 to 12 acres per pair. On our crop residue rates, our average rate was at $16 per acre, and that stayed pretty steady this year from last year. We also had a range of $10 to $30 per acre, and that of course kind of depended on the type of residue cattle were grazing, and then fencing and water availability, that sort of thing. This year we did not see as a significant problem with nitrates, so that kind of helped producers allow crop residue to be a really good feed source for their cattle this year. They usually graze their cattle for around 3 months, and that was pretty typical across the whole district. We also want to remind you that the most important aspect of leasing arrangements is the date for notification of termination of a lease. So this D-Day, we like to say, is January 29th, or 30 days prior to March 1st. Leases can be written or oral, with written leases generally 3 to 5 years, and then oral leases are only enforceable for 1 year. So it's good to be kind of managing that and keeping up with that every year. And we also want to remind you that Post-Rock District is only one resource for leasing arrangements and rates. There are multiple other resources that you can look at either online, or we can also provide you with paper copies. At any of our offices in the Post-Rock District, we also want to remind you that it's good to look at other resources for different rates that you can take into account for your operation.
Okay, so call any of our Post-Rock District offices and like our Facebook page, because we give a lot of information for you through, and it might just be crop information, it might be livestock information, or it really promotes our educational programs that we have. And talking about educational programs, we have several this winter. So take a look at those. They're usually listed on our main page under the events portion of it. And also we have a weekly ag online newsletter that Blaire and I put crop and livestock information in. So please sign up for those too, and we'd be glad to add you to our weekly news roundup. So this has been Blaire Todd and Sandra Wick, and we'll see you out in the field another time. Thanks.